So as it says here, the 7 represents the soul in nature, represents the soul in nature, and therefore it becomes the center of all symbolic numbers, so to speak. We find the sacred number interwoven into all the religious systems known on our planet, and the very warp and woof of creation seem to bristle with 7s. The sacred number of the Magi, and one that has been known in our symbolism as the strangest of all, is this number 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, which is composed of twice 7, 4 times 7, 8 times 7, with the ego added to the last figure. And you're like, what the hell does that mean? That means that if you multiply this number from 1 to 9, the output of that number will be only variations of this same number. There will be no 3, there will be no 0, and there will be no 6. Now there is a number. There's one more number which I found, which is not revealed. That is the other number, but this is the one that is known. And we'll talk about the other number later, next time. But this number is a secret number, but a secret known number because of how it behaves. Okay? You take this number, you times it by 2, times it by 3, times it by 4, all the way to 9, and it will only push back these numbers in a different order. The same numbers, no more numbers. Okay? Now, when you line up the cards, which is a suit, like a house, okay? And you place the cards in this order because they're 13. You place 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay? 2 here is the pillars, and you stack it. The 7 will sit in the middle of those cards. Okay? Now, again, this is not a deep dive on this, but I'm showing you where we're going. Okay? Because it doesn't become like right off for anyone. You don't become aware completely right away of what this really means and what can really be done. But I'm going to show you just a couple examples here. So it says the mystic number can be represented in the emblems of the knowledge as follows. Change any card from the right to the left, and you will get a true product by some number. So let's look at that. We have here the Mystic Star Tarot. Now, would you assume that this is a 6-pointed star or a 7-pointed star? That has often been a question of my own. Does this symbol represent 6 or 7? I'm here to tell you it does represent 7 because there is a center. And in the center is where all of the power emanates from. Okay? So this means that this is technically a 7-pointed star. It's just that the center is not recognized. And you've seen geometry like that. They always tell you, hey, make sure you count the center because that's another point. So the 6-pointed star is actually 7. Okay? Now, notice how when I take this number, any number that I add to the number adjacent to the card will equal the number 9. So 4 plus 5 is 9, right? 7 plus 2 is 9. 1 plus 8 is 9. Okay? So now you could say, okay, maybe that's been arbitrarily placed, right? Until you go further in this, which is, as I'm saying, like, this can't be, we can't go into a deep dive on this right now because it needs further elaboration. Because literally what you will discover in this is that the world has been put together like a house of cards for real. And that each position on where the card is, including your birthday, which actually corresponds to a card, does really determine the energies around that person, that energy, that fate, if you may. But then it goes deeper. I would ask you to further consider this, because as 7 is often mentioned there is one number that sits behind all these numbers, and that number is 9. Because now you need to consider these anomalies about 9. And I'm going to paste these here just in case you want to do your own wizardry later on. Because then once we finally conclude with the meaning of the number, so it's like once you understand what the number does, and then you understand how to emit the number into the reality, there's nothing impeding the manifestation, because the sequence of the numbers, they're exact, and few people know the sequence. I don't know anybody who knows the sequence. I don't know anybody who's ever even talked about this before. I heard people talk about the magical squares and stuff like that, but it's all kind of left to happenstance. What this work is about is it's about that there was a template that was built before there were humans, before there was much of anything. And it is through that template in which the most powerful masters of occultism, if you may, operate through. They can not only tell you the past, they can tell you your future, because the cards do move in a sequence and nothing deviates from that sequence. And I know some people say, wow, man, I don't know about this. And I was the same way. But then instead of challenging it, I started to notice anomalies and wondered if that anomaly could be what causes it. And let me break that down. I'm going to paste something here, and we're talking about the anomalies of 9, okay? Because I keep finding more of them. And every time I find one, I write it down. And we're going to just conclude here today. So if you understand what I'm telling you, is I'm telling you that the world is designed around this number 7. And this is why they got the 7 candlesticks over in Israel, but they also have the Star of David. And you think that that Star of David is 6 points, but it's not. It's really 7. Because of the light emitting from the center. And then they show you that, hey, we got the 7 candlesticks, but these 7 candlesticks are actually 7 powers, okay? And all this is deeply shrouded in occult, and no one would even understand what it's about, because you would need to have original access to the tarot, the first tarot and the mythos around tarot. But you can, without getting into that, you need to understand that in Great Britain, they brushed shoulders so heavily with the gypsies and Egypt, which seems to say gypsy in itself, that what was known as the book of all books came into their possession, which was the tarot in itself. But the tarot wasn't just a simple card game or a simple thing of divination. There was a sequence of numbers behind the tarot. And the practitioner of those cards that knew those numbers and knew where a person really fit in that schema could, in fact, determine that person's future. You see what I mean? But of course, by the time it fell into the hands of the gypsies, which they say were, the gypsies still seem to be cursed to this day from using the tarot to only make money and to predict people's future for a wage, because that was also surrounded by the tarot, that when you talk about the tarot, like, you need to be very giving with the information and the knowledge. You see what I mean? So I have fulfilled that goal because I'm giving all the gems. Now listen to this. 9, of course, when multiplied, always creates a derivative of itself. Okay, right? So 9, when multiplied against any number, always creates a derivative. Example, 9 times 2 is 18. 1 plus 8 is 9. We all seen that. Okay, but 9 goes further. Of course, when added to a number, it mirrors that number back on itself after the simplification, i.e. 9 plus 5 is 14, 1 plus 4 is 5. So it mirrors 5 back to itself. It'll do all that. It'll do that with all numbers 1 to 8. But it goes further. When you take any number and you reduce it by its simplification, when you take any number, this is kind of a typo here, but when you take any number and then you subtract it One second. Let me just get my pen out here. And let me get my calculator. So if we're doing 142, exactly. Okay, so if we take the number 142 and we simplify it, okay, so this is what's happening here. There's 2 here. Give me 1 second, guys. And ladies, give me one moment. There's 2 here. There's 2 more. There's not just 1 more. I just deleted the second one thinking it was a redundant. So you take any number and you reduce it by its simplification, and it will have the nth root of 9. So when you take, 472 and you minus it by 7, it equals 135, and then 135 divided by 15 equals 9. Exactly. So if we change that number and we made it 589, let's say for all intents and purposes. We go 589. And we minus it by 22. We get 569. If we divide that by 9, it goes in evenly at 63, right? So 63, 567 divided by 9 is 63, which is a root of 9, okay? So 9 also, of course, in this case, does some weird stuff. Any number, you just simplify the number and then you subtract that simplified number from the original number and you'll get a root of the number 9. So in occultism, without getting too confused here, because I need real supporting notes on this. This number sits like, okay, this is the easiest way to explain it. So imagine that the entire matrix is designed around this number, and we'll call that number 7. But in order to change the matrix, you move from the 9, okay? And as long as you have the 9, you can do things, weird things in a matrix. Like 1, since the whole matrix is built on, let's say, the construct of 7, you can mirror back any object in the matrix. You can basically clone any object in the matrix, right? This is what Kabbalah is talking about, but it never explains it this clearly. It never connects to a person how exactly they're manifesting this stuff. And either most don't manifest or some only manifest with pure faith. This means that they're not questioning at all why it works. They're just performing the act, and they're performing it without any doubt, which is super difficult these days. But then when you take this number also and you put it to any number, you only need to simplify the number first for it to come under the control of the power of 9. So that means that anything in the matrix can actually be manipulated, but through a higher power. And this higher power we're going to call 9. Now, this 9 is a symbol. It's a movement. It's an archetype. So thus, that's why they had this thing called the Council of 9 and the Jasons, right? And this was about that the ones that control the world, and everybody's trying to get that, get that title, were called the Council of 9, also known as the Jasons, okay? And throughout occultism, this 9 sits as almost like a hidden society or a hidden group, revealing almost none of the knowledge, but then thrusting like 7 there as the replacement for the number 9, if you may, in occultism, meaning that 7 then is said to do sometimes the things that only the 9 can do to keep people obscure from understanding how the numbers work. You see what I mean? And then how to actually build the tower. Because you see, the tower is built on 13 cards, right? So where else does that number remind you of beside like numbers of the moon, right? Or why there's no 13th floor in an elevator. It also lets you see that obviously 2 times 13 is 26. We have 26 letters in the English language. We put another 26, we have 52, which gives us 52 weeks in a year. So we have like the whole house then. But just in using English alone, as I pointed out, you're only half magic. You have half, literally, of the magical system, but you don't have its pair, okay? And even if we synchronize what we were saying today about mending the bones, I find this strange process that continues to repeat in magic, which is to cast bones or lots, or even the knuckle bone and the jack bone from the leg as a way like dice to cast lots, which also tarot seem to be affiliated with a bit. And so all of this says that the mending, if you may, or the knowledge of mending reality, i.e. the 7, which is the world soul, and the 9, which is basically the universal soul. The act of mending that can basically be accomplished by the human being who sits in communion between these two numbers technically having innate potential, meaning that for most, it can't do anything except for the one who understands how to plant this. And then when you start thinking about this process, and this is why we got to come back again on this, and I need to also study up a little bit more. This process was about entering into the template that you needed to understand how to approach the great city, if you may. And that all of true occultism was about this, that there were paths to the great city, some in which only led to peril because the city was like locked into this fortress or structure because it contained the house, all the royal figures, the king, the queen, the jack, etc., right? And that this city was commanded from within, and then the 4 rivers then distributed the power from the city to the rest of existence, okay? So this wasn't necessarily like a physical city. In fact, it was an astral city, a template itself that laid itself over what we were calling the world. And through the ability to understand how it moves, which is confirmed in numbers. So meaning that this doesn't take on you got to take my advice for this. You learned through the number, and the number showed you the truth. And the truth couldn't be refuted, just as what 9 is doing in these numbers is weird. Like, it would show you that the whole thing can be changed into anything by a 9. You see what I mean? So then once you understand how this archetype sits and how this power sits, you will understand, like when you visualize a diamond, why that brings wealth immediately. When you visualize hearts, why they bring love at certain times. You see what I mean? So that's what I have today is one, more of like the entryway to understand how these things came about, right? Like how they came back into discovery and even into the language. Well, Goydell Glass and some folks was over here putting together the whole Tower of Babel because they understood the power of language and magic, like the mistresses of speech in the ancient times originally did. These secrets are either kept or they're lost, but they're never lost to someone who knows the power of the numbers, because basically, just like they say with Hebrew, like if you have one letter, you can put back together the whole language. It's the same with this. If you understood how to enter the city, you could basically construct the whole matrix, if you may, and then change the matrix. And I'm absolutely, positively 100% sure that there are people that are doing this. And there are things that can't be classified as people doing this. And what it does is it gives them somewhat of a Mandela effect on the reality, where everybody else will be wondering where something that was so solid went, that we all knew, especially in our memories, but it was all changed. Because this is the malleability of the house of cards. It's like why on a door they had the keypad and the keypad opens up the safe, or the numbers open up the safe. The numbers always, or is a number or a key, always opens up the locked door or the locked reality. So this is the master key. So those numbers 1, 4, 2, 5, 8, 7, those are master keys, but you can't use the key if you see it's like, what do we do with it? We got the number. It has to become a part of how you understand the system. And when you understand the system and there's no doubts, which math does, it leaves you without doubts. There needs to be no preachers or nobody else trying to prove why this works. And then you align it simply, which is like setting a clock. Once you align it to the stars, then you are already there with your astral vehicle, right? So that's what I posit. I would desist for now since it's 3 hours, but you get where I'm going with this about how these are the factual levels of how reality should really be enjoyed. Yeah.